For decades, many people have misunderstood what Star Wars really is. Sure, it might be a galaxy filled with aliens, lightsabers, and a sense of adventure that might feel tailor-made for kids, but calling Star Wars a children's franchise kind of misses the bigger picture. From the very beginning, Star Wars has been a multi-generational saga, just as much about political intrigue, moral dilemmas, and personal redemption as it is about action and spectacle. This was one of the main missteps of Skeleton Crew, whose viewing numbers were recently released. They weren't very good. The entire concept of Skeleton Crew was that it would be a Star Wars show for children. But this concept, frankly, was flawed from the start. George Lucas himself once said that Star Wars is meant for children of all ages, with the focus being on childlike wonder and a sense of adventure. And while that might sound like the franchise is for kids, it's always been more nuanced. The themes Lucas incorporated were often mature: death, slavery, corruption, redemption. And though they were presented in a family-friendly way, they resonated with adults and children alike. That's what made Star Wars feel universal. You can see this balance in something like Star Wars: The Clone Wars, which was marketed as a kids' show, but definitely included heavy themes like extortion, gambling, betrayal, and even the horrors of war. Now, if you compare that to Star Wars: Young Jedi Adventures, which is essentially Jedi Muppet Babies, both exist under the Star Wars banner, but the tone and depth aren't even remotely similar. And that's where Skeleton Crew struggled. It aimed for the wrong audience. But this isn't just about tone. The quality of Star Wars shows leading up to Skeleton Crew left the franchise on some pretty shaky ground. Both the Acolyte and Ahsoka struggled to resonate with fans, with some criticizing their departure from Star Wars values and tone. Viewership was already dipping because Star Wars fans were losing trust in the brand's ability to deliver compelling, high-quality content. Instead of reigniting excitement, these missteps created an uphill battle for Skeleton Crew to prove itself to an audience that was already increasingly skeptical. And launching a show aimed at children on the heels of this decline kind of made it feel out of touch with what the franchise's core fan base wanted. Another thing that has historically anchored Star Wars shows is their proximity to established characters and even stories. Even The Mandalorian initially drew audiences by leaning on the legacy of the Empire, Jedi, and Boba Fett-like imagery. Skeleton Crew, however, didn't offer that kind of connection. There were no familiar faces, no ties to iconic lore, and no sense of where it fits in the grander Star Wars story. For fans who crave continuity and deeper explorations of the galaxy they love, this show felt isolated and ultimately expendable. Take, for example, this fan-favorite keyboardist. Remember Max Rebo from Return of the Jedi? Well, there's a character in Skeleton Crew that looks a lot like him. But apparently they're not even the same species. Moments like these kind of highlight how disconnected the show feels from the Star Wars universe. And yet, despite these missteps, somehow Skeleton Crew received glowing critical ratings. Early reviewers seemed to love it, with even some calling it one of the best Star Wars projects in years. For a show that struggled to capture the essence of the franchise, conceptually, this praise feels surprisingly high. This raises the question, are the critics seeing something the audience isn't, or is this another case of misplaced hype? These factors, a misjudged target audience, the shadow of underwhelming recent shows, and a lack of connection to established Star Wars lore, created an uphill battle for Skeleton Crew. And if the first episode is meant to hook viewers and leave them wanting more, it had a lot to prove. Now, with all of this in mind, I watched the first episode of Skeleton Crew, curious to see if it lived up to the high praise from critics. And after watching it, I can confidently say that it's far from the high-praised show it's been made out to be. The episode isn't without its moments, but it definitely struggles to deliver the balance, originality, and immersion that Star Wars fans really expect. Here are 6 main reasons why only the first episode, fell short for me. First, the show feels too removed from the Star Wars universe. Instead of immersing us in a galaxy far, far away, Skeleton Crew spends too much time in what feels like small-town USA. The characters eat cereal and milk for breakfast, walk their dogs down sidewalks, and live in houses with front yards and garages. Star Wars has always had a unique, otherworldly feel, even on planets with humble settings like Tatooine. But here it feels like we're in a Disney Channel show, not the Star Wars galaxy. 2. The music doesn't feel like Star Wars. The score feels more like it belongs in a generic kids' adventure series than a Star Wars production. Star Wars music is iconic for its sweeping orchestras and emotional undertones, from John Williams' legendary themes to The Mandalorian's experimental but captivating sound. In Skeleton Crew, the music is underwhelming. It's whimsical but not memorable, and lacks that connection and association with the franchise. Number 3, Neil the character is difficult to connect with. One of the key characters, Neil, struggles to express emotion because of the limitations of the design. Now, characters that can't show facial expressions can still work. I mean, look at R2-D2 or even Grogu. But they need to make up for it with body language, dialogue, or some strong storytelling. Neil doesn't have these yet, so it makes it hard for viewers to care about him as a character. 4. There is a lack of originality. While the show introduces original characters, too much of their journey feels like callbacks to the original trilogy. It's not nostalgia done well, it's just repetition. Instead of feeling fresh and exciting, Skeleton Crew often reminds us of better stories from the past without carving its own identity. 5. The dialogue doesn't have that Star Wars talk. At one point, one of the kids says something is totally wizard. Now, I know it's meant to be quirky and fun, but it feels out of place, especially in a Star Wars show. Star Wars has given us so many fun space words and phrases. Nerf herder, bantha fodder, laser brain. Surely someone could have thought of something to replace wizard. I don't want to be reminded of Harry Potter. I want to feel like I'm in a galaxy far, far away. Number 6 is that there are too many references using dialogue. Throughout the episode, the character Wim repeatedly mentions the Jedi Temple, almost as if the writers are trying to reassure us that yes, this is still a Star Wars show. Instead of weaving references naturally into the story, the dialogue feels like a checklist of reminders that this show belongs in the galaxy far, far away. Adding all these things together, the first episode of Skeleton Crew isn't necessarily a bad show. It's competently made, and there are some moments of charm, but it really struggles to capture the essence of Star Wars. For all its callbacks and references, it still feels disconnected from the universe fans know and love, at least in the first episode. The show may appeal to younger audiences, or those new to the franchise, or those hoping for something good from Star Wars, but for most longtime fans, it's not hard to feel like it's missing something that's fundamental. But those are just my thoughts. What did you think? If you saw Skeleton Crew and liked it, I'm really happy that you did. It's not necessarily a bad show, it's just not the story most Star Wars fans were looking for, and the ratings show it.